Good afternoon, YouTube pipe smokers. Prairie Piper here with a very special guest, and hopefully this is the first of many interviewers of for Canadian pipe content, but also just the general pipe community as a whole. So I'd like to introduce Charles Lemon from dadspipes.com. He is. We'll get into what he's been doing and what he's contributed to the pipe scene here in Canada and pipe community in general. But one of the main reasons he's here is November 2023, I believe. Charles, is that right? November 2023.
Yep.
This book was published, Brigham Pipes, A Century of Canadian Briar. So we're going to be going over Charles' research, the book, dadspipes.com, what that is, and just get to know Charles. So welcome, Charles.
Thanks very much. Glad to be here.
Okay, so I guess we'll just start with some general intro questions. I think you're probably well known, especially within Ontario and probably Canada, I think, as a whole. But maybe just tell us a little bit about yourself. When did you first start smoking a pipe? Do you remember what brand the first pipe was? That kind of stuff.
Yep. Yep. I bought my first pipe in the early 90s. I was a university student and also a reservist. I was an officer in the Army Signals Reserve
Oh, didn't know that.
in Kingston in the early 90s. So it was the pipe was great in the field. It was my mosquito repellent.
Yeah, yeah. Heavy Latakia or dark fired, maybe.
Yeah, nowadays, yes. Back then, no. It was an over the counter cherry aromatic
Oh, yeah,
that probably doesn't exist anymore. You know,
yeah, like a
but
backwoods
it
or
was whatever was available easily
yeah.
over the counter at the time.
And where did you go for your tobacco?
Well, there were a couple of decent pipe shops in Kingston at the time. Um, so I bought my first pipe, which was a Brigham, a 2 dot,
Okay.
straight pair. Uh, so I bought that and tamper, lighter, and a
And
pouch of something that smelled good,
yeah, yeah. And did you buy?
like a lot of us do when we start off.
Yeah, I remember here in Winnipeg at Thomas Hines when I went. It was Georgia Peach, just a house blend. And then I think after that, I ended up getting a little pouch of something whiskey, right? I mean,
Oh yeah,
the whiskey and the
yeah,
cherry stuff.
yeah, yeah. It was hard to find what I'd consider the good stuff.
Yeah.
Well, especially on a student budget. That was, I mean, it was a lot less expensive than it is now, but it was still more expensive than I wanted to spend on a student budget for a tin of
No,
something nice.
I know. Yeah, yeah. I think, geez, 25, maybe $30 for a tin still seemed like it was not expensive, but you couldn't just go and buy what you wanted all the
No,
time,
that was
right?
it. It was a considered purchase.
Yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. When you bought a tin, it was something you cherished for maybe a month
Hmm.
or two,
Yeah.
depending on how often you smoked. So, what's your favorite tobaccos today? Like, if you're lighting up, today, tomorrow, on the weekend, what are you reaching for?
I tend to vacillate between a old codger burley,
Oh yeah,
just a straight up Carter Hall, which unfortunately is not available in Canada. So you have to
yeah,
bring it in from the U.S., which I don't recommend anyone doing at the
no,
moment. Far too expensive.
yeah,
Um, but I was lucky to get a tub of that a few years back, and it goes a long way. So if I want a brain dead, I don't need to tamp, I don't need to relight. I just want a putter in the garden kind of smoke. A bowl of Carter Hall will absolutely do that. If I'm looking to, sit still and savor things a little bit more, then I tend to reach for a Balkan or a
okay,
or a heavy English. Um, yeah, Star of the East,
nice,
Nightcap, something in that vein.
yeah, yeah. No, it's there's just something to be said about the old codger blends. They just do what you want them to do.
Yep.
You
Yep.
just
They're
they're
still
easy to
around for a
pack.
reason.
Exactly, easy to pack,
Yeah.
easy to light. Just throw them in there
Yeah.
and bombs away pretty much. Yeah,
Yeah.
no, I agree with you. There's a lot of people will grind the gears on the over the counters, but like you said, there's a reason they're still around, and after a few years, you come to appreciate things are just a little bit more simple.
Yep. Yep. Surprisingly, some of those blends are, I mean, they've been around for 100 years
Yeah, well, half and half.
practically.
I like half and half.
Yep.
Carter Hall's great. They're we're all from the same vein, right? The half and half,
Yeah.
the Carters and
Yeah.
Walter
The
Rayleighs
Walter
or whatever.
Raleigh and
Raleigh.
yeah, all that whole category of really basic, straight up burley.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So where do you smoke? Can you or do you want to smoke inside or do you usually go outside? I go out in the garage. That's me.
Yeah. Yeah. No, not in the house. It's one of those things that you can never get rid of.
Exactly. Yeah.
Anyone who's walked into an open house where they've had people smoking inside knows it immediately, and it's almost impossible to get rid of it. Soaks into the fabric of the building.
Yeah.
So no, I mean, I'm lucky in that I can smoke a pipe in the shop if I want to because it's mine, and I'm the only one out there. Or I can go to the garage or I can putter around the yard, but it's generally speaking an outside thing.
Yeah. Yeah. No, me too. And I guess in the winter you must be heated, I assume, right? Because you're in
Yes.
an area. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. To say one of the benefits of the shop is that
Yeah.
it's heated in the winter and cooled in the summer.
Oh,
Because
nice.
otherwise,
Okay.
all of my glue and everything else, all of the dyes and everything would freeze and
Right.
or cook.
Yeah, I
You
never even
know,
thought about that. Yeah,
yeah,
especially well, it's the extremes, right? We got, it's either too hot or too cold
yeah,
where we are.
yeah, exactly. So it's
Yeah.
yeah, temperature controlled setting is an important thing. I don't want to have to go and buy new glue every week.
Oh yeah, big time. I know you've got some kids. Do they show an interest in anything that you do? I know they helped you. I think you said editing the book, but
Yes,
but
definitely.
did
Yeah, they definitely provided input, formatting and
yeah.
phrasing, image selection, that kind of thing. Um, and I think they both tried their hand at some basic restoration work
Oh, cool.
over the years, but no, neither of them are particularly interested in taking up the mantle, so to speak.
Yeah. No, that's yeah. Well, it's certainly not a hobby that's probably going to bring them wealth and riches. So,
No, no, I can tell you I mean the industry as a whole has taken a few kicks to the pants in the last 5 years or
yeah,
so. When Dunhill shut down their tobacco production and sold the recipes over to Peterson, and then when McClellan closed their doors,
oh, and
and
it's not
the
left now.
latest STG takeover,
Yeah,
and the subsequent reduction in the number of blends available. I mean,
yeah.
everything has just gotten a lot smaller.
No, you're right. Yeah, that was super disappointing to see the heritage of Sutliff just vanish like that.
Yeah,
Kind of sad.
yeah,
I
yeah.
mean, I don't want to get off topic, but you kind of wonder, um, that maybe that just could have been sold off to somebody else, but I guess they had other motivations, or maybe it just wasn't worth it. It's hard to tell. I don't want to judge them, but you never know what
No,
the ledger looks, on the other side that, maybe nobody wanted any of it anyways.
yeah, yeah. I don't know. I didn't dig too deep into the situation.
Yeah, me neither.
Yes, okay, that's happening, and that's going to have some ripples in the
Yeah,
pond, and we'll see where it goes from there. But
yeah,
you know,
and
I
not the
understand.
first
From
and
a
not
business
the last.
perspective, I can kind of understand the consolidation
Yeah, that's
stuff.
true.
It's been happening on the pipe production side of things for a number of years too.
Yeah, that's true. You're right. Yeah.
But Yeah.
It seems more personal when it's tobacco rather than pipes. It seems like when
Well,
pipes.
it always seems to be our favorite blends
Yeah,
that go.
exactly.
Wait a
It
minute,
always.
you can't, you know.
Yeah.
So yes, when I was lucky to grab a stockpile of vintage Syrian before it
Oh wow.
vaporized into the wind. So
Oh
uh,
nice.
every now and again, I'll bust into some of that and
Yeah,
enjoy that. But
yeah.
yeah.
I had actually just started stocking up last year on Mac Baron's the HH series, Old Dark
Mm.
Fired in Virginia. So when they went away, I was lucky because I'd started about a year or two ago to start. I started putting stuff in the cellar. So
Yeah. Yeah.
okay, let's move on to dadspipes.com.
Yeah.
So when did it begin and how did it start?
Well, officially, the first blog post was posted in July of 2015. So we just hit our 10-year anniversary.
Wow,
According to
congratulations.
my website,
Yeah.
it sends me these notices every now and again. Yeah. So it's officially been 10 years, and we just hit the about the same time, actually within a week of that, I got a notification of breaking the 500,000 view marks on
Oh
the
wow,
blogs. So
nice,
that's great.
fantastic. Yeah.
Yeah. It started in 2015 after I had um, a little bit of repair and restoration experience under my belt. Um, we go back a few years, and around 2012, 2013, I rediscovered what was left of my father's collection of pipes.
Okay.
He passed many years before, and um, I have a number of siblings, and we each got a few of a few pipes from the collection as keepsakes. Somehow the bulk of it ended up in my basement somewhere. Uh, you know, sitting in a shoebox unmarked for 20 years or whatever.
Wow. Yeah.
So I found them and I thought, well, these don't deserve to be in a shoebox. Let's get them out. I'll figure out how to clean them up and I'll put them on display. You know, and that was really the motivation to figure out how to restore them. You know, and I mean, mainly because all the stems had turned, that lovely puke green color that
Yeah.
vulcanite turns when you
Yeah.
ignore it for
Yeah.
30 years or something, you know.
Yeah.
Especially when the pipes are, used and put away wet, so to speak.
Yeah.
Right? I mean, when somebody passes, nobody cleans their stuff for them and puts it away nicely. It just goes in a box.
Well, and especially something like pipes, it's just
Yeah.
so specific to certain people, right?
Yeah. So they got put away and eventually found their way into my hands, and I started digging around online looking for DIY methods of bringing it all back. How do I deoxidize a vulcanite stem? Um, how what do I how do I properly or safely ream and clean a bowl that's got a quarter inch of cake in it? And
Oh yeah. Yeah.
how
So
do I refinish it when I'm done? What products to use, what products not to use, which is probably more important.
oh yeah.
That sort of thing. There are a lot of different methods out there, and while the majority seem to fall towards one end, there are some what I would think are rather suspicious or eyebrow raising methodologies out there. And yeah, anyway, that's what got me onto it.
So when you were when you'd polished up your dad's pipes, you'd kind of bought all the equipment that you needed. Um, was there when did the seed sort of plant? When was the seed planted? I guess you said, you know what, this is something that maybe I want to take a look at doing on the side,
Well, yeah,
like to turn into a business at that point.
yeah, yeah. Say was probably late in late in 2014, early
Okay.
2015.
So maybe a couple years later.
Yeah, yeah. Where I had started taking, photographs of the restorations in process, and it kind of met online with a few people. Um, Steve Log in Vancouver from rebornpipes.com
Yeah, I've seen his stuff. Yeah.
was a huge resource for me
Yeah.
in the beginning. Um, he's sort of the I like to tease him a bit, say he's the grandpappy of online pipe restoration sites.
Oh
Um,
yeah.
and I mean, the site is prolific. There are, one or two posts practically every day. And at this point, he has a cadre of 6, 8, maybe more contributors.
Oh, okay. Okay.
Yeah. So
So there's a team of
he's
them.
got a good number of people that are,
Okay.
that are also, kind of, restoring on a hobbyist level and posting what they find. And many people kind of end up working on, specific brands or specific styles of pipes that they like. They end up with, knowing quite a bit about Danish pipes
Okay.
or French pipes or uh, a particular brand. Maybe they're Pete geeks or Savinelli fans or
Yeah.
that sort of thing. And so there's a lot of variation on of stuff there. And anyone who has stumbled across their first estate pipes at, say, antique mall or boot sale or wherever you might find these things, I always say, go over to Reborn Pipes, read as much as you can, collect the materials that people are using, and then give it a go. Um,
Yeah, one of the things that I like that you do, just for our viewers, if you go to dadspipes.com, you can sign up for Charles' newsletter. But you can take a look at the site, cruise it. There's a lot of really cool stuff. But what Charles is referring to is every time he does a restoration, he basically takes pictures of the before, the after, but also the process
yeah,
of restoring the pipe. It's super, super cool. Great high resolution images. And, Charles will give you a little bit of the history behind the pipe that he's working on, that he's restoring, before, middle, and after pictures of the finished product. Really, really cool. So go check that out. But that's kind of what that Charles is referring to here. Um,
yeah, yeah. I always my goal from the start was not to, well, heaven forbid, not to set myself up as an expert in anything,
yeah.
because even after 10 years of doing this and thousands of pipes, I really, I don't see myself as an expert. I mean, I've got experience at this point. I know my methods and what has worked for me and the results that I get. I mean, there they are. Anyone can pop on and see the photos and see what works, what has worked for me. I also, honestly, I try to post the failures just as much.
Yeah,
This is
what's the
what I
vast majority.
tried, and it
Yeah.
didn't work.
No,
And
you're right.
so now I have to go back and I have to reevaluate and find something else, find a different route forward. And the mistakes along the way are just as important as the successes. Um, Maybe more so, because everyone is going to mess something up eventually.
Yeah.
I mean, some of them it's just, oh well, I glued the tenon into its stem slightly crooked and now I've got a gap. Well, okay, that's reasonably easy to overcome. You dig it out and you put it, you clean it up and you put a new one in and you make sure that it's straight this time.
Yeah.
Other things are a little harder to come back from. When the lathe launches a hand cut stem across the room when it's 90% finished,
Oh yeah.
and you have to start all over again from a chunk of rod stock. So, that one was painful,
I bet.
and I debated. Do I really want to post that? But no, yep, I'm going to, because that's really what happened, and people need to be aware of the
But
pitfalls. If they're
it's
going to try to follow along.
yeah.
And there really aren't that many professional pipe repair shops operating anymore.
Well, I would imagine, especially in Canada.
Yeah,
There can't be
there,
many at all.
yeah, there are a few that will do sort of the easy stuff. They'll put a shank band on, um,
Yeah, I think
maybe fit a new stem.
yeah, I think
Um,
like Victory in Oshawa there. I think Victory Pipes, they'll do some minor stuff, I think.
yeah,
Am I correct
yeah.
in that or
And I know Bladder and Bladder in Montreal used to
that's right.
offer a range of repairs,
Yeah.
um, but I know from from certain pipers in Montreal where they've been looking for repairs, they've said that they've ended up sending them to me because you know Bladder didn't want to get involved at in that level of repair.
Yeah.
Um, and then I've had the good fortune to work on some truly museum quality stuff. You
Oh,
know,
wow.
um, pipes from the early to mid 1800s that have come to me in bits and pieces,
Huh.
and I've had to figure out how it was made, what materials were used, and how best to reproduce those things. And those are the ones that I find interesting because, I mean,
Yeah,
I've
that's
done a lot of
fascinating.
basic sort of ream and clean and polish and stem replacements and that sort of thing. But there's the technology for what is a standard manufacture of pipes today is very different from what it was, 150 years ago.
Oh, I bet. Yeah. So
Yeah.
it sounds like were you generally self-taught, I guess, over the years? Like,
I would say more or less. Yeah. I mean, I took what I could from the well, I'll say rather limited information that was available online at the time.
yeah.
I surfed whatever restoration and repair sites that I could find. I spent a lot of time on pipe forums, um, some of which are no longer functioning.
Yeah.
But just sort of gleaning bits and pieces of information here and there. Um,
I
the
guess a
the
lot of trial and error.
uh, yeah, and early on, yeah, and it was a lot of. I mean, I bought literally at one point early on. I bought a box of dead and dying pipes from a picker, basically an antiques picker,
Okay.
who had traveled around and bought up these estate lots of things and whatever. And he had this, and they were rough, cracked bowls, broken shanks, snapped off stems, uh,
Yeah.
you know, cake so thick you couldn't get a pipe cleaner into the bowl, that kind of
Yeah.
thing. They were worth basically nothing.
Yeah.
And so it was a relatively risk-free way of figuring out what's going to work before I started working on somebody's, World War II Dunhill.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah,
So is there you basically do it all, I guess, at Dad's Pipes, right? Like, is there
yeah.
anything you don't do? I mean, you do stems, you do bowl work, reaming, like you
Yeah, there are very, very few things that I have to refuse, basically, and they're generally based on functionality.
okay.
I use a mini lathe for stem work, and so it has a limited capacity. So I've had to turn down things like custom church warden stems because they're that's an 8-inch stem, and then you need a 10 or 12-inch drill bit, and then you need extra length on the end for
Yeah.
the tailstock that's going to hold all that, and then room to bring A and B together. So and it just physically won't fit in my equipment.
And
Um,
I know from talking to over the years, talking to artisan pipe makers, I've heard many of them say for them, the button is one of the most difficult aspects to work on
it's
in the pipe. I
yeah,
always, I always thought it was the briar in that, but I've heard many of them say stem work can be very challenging.
yeah, I would agree. I would agree. Now,
Yeah.
I have to admit, I am a repairer and restorer. I have done a carve your own kit on my own, but my I'm not a maker.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. Fair enough.
I've
There must
never
be
made
times
a
where,
pipe from scratch. My lathe won't
yeah.
take one; it's too small. I can't spin a bowl. Not in the equipment, not with the equipment I have in the shop space that I have.
So what's the most challenging aspect of restoring a pipe? I guess it maybe just depends on how badly it's banged up, but what do you?
Yeah, I mean, a couple of things come to mind. I mean, a hand cut stem is always a challenge, regardless of the pipe it's going to be attached to. Um, so for those, you're starting from solid rod, ebonite or acrylic or some kind of resin, or
Yeah.
those are the main materials available today. Um, and so there's multi-part drillings to create an airway, um, slot cutting, uh, button shaping, all of that sort of stuff. And a lot of it, even with a lathe, is still hand work. It's, you can only take a stem to a certain point, and then you have to literally just sit there at the bench with files and sandpaper and work out the fine details.
Yeah. I'm
Uh,
always. Sorry. Go ahead.
yeah. And so even pipe makers are reluctant to get into stem replacement because it's kind of
Yeah.
backwards to the process of making a pipe. When you make a pipe, you rough turn the bowl, you drill the shank and airway, and you fit a stem, either a precast stem blank or a rod. You drill the rod, either turn a tenon or fit a tenon into the rod, and you attach it to the rough turned shank, and then the whole pipe is made as a piece from
Yeah.
there on. Um, and just replacing the stem can get tricky because the transition from stem to shank has to stay uniform.
Yeah.
You don't want to dip in the profile anywhere along the way.
Yeah, I'm always amazed to read forums where people are just like, "Oh, you can just do it yourself. It's a piece of cake. Just get some sandpaper and
Well, you can.
like yeah, I don't recommend anybody personally. I don't recommend anybody work on their own pipes.
I
Even
mean,
even basic stuff like go to dadspipes.com. If you in Canada here, or I mean worldwide, I guess
yeah.
you'll yeah, worldwide. Yeah, I just don't recommend people working on their own pipes. I know a lot of forums out there. People say this is easy, that's easy. It's not as easy as it looks.
It's not. It's not. And if nothing else, that box of dead and dying estates that I bought years ago was enough to prove that to me.
Yeah,
The I mean, assuming the pipe is actually in good structural shape, and what you're really doing is cleaning it up. You're restoring the cosmetics of the thing. Reaming a bowl isn't hard, but you can easily over ream a bowl and end up digging out the floor, and then you've thinned the briar and you've changed the smoking geometry, and that
yeah,
sort of thing. You can clean them up, you can refinish them, but there are products that you don't want to put on a pipe. you know
yeah.
uh,
Yeah,
and
there's the science behind a pipe. I mean, we often just look at these things as just a hunk of wood you throw some tobacco
yeah,
in it, but there's a lot of
yeah.
science that goes into making a pipe.
Well, there is, yeah, the geometry of where the airway meets the bowl, the diameter of the airway,
Yeah,
the size and shape of the bowl. You get a U-shaped bowl carving bit, or a V-shaped bit, or a kind of a hybrid in between sort of shape. And they all act a little differently in practice. When you finally pack it and light it, it all has to work together.
yeah,
There are some designs that seem, purpose built to create turbulence in the airway, in the smoke stream along the way, and
yeah,
you play around with it a little bit to try and smooth things out. Um, but yeah, there are lots of little ways to go wrong along the way. So unless you're willing to sacrifice a pipe, I think if you don't know what you're doing, then find somebody who does.
No, I agree 100%.
Yeah.
When anybody ever asks me my advice on that, I'm like, just, I've sent guys, told guys by your website, get a professional to do it. It's not worth potentially ruining a nice pipe or any pipe for
Yeah.
that matter.
Yeah. I mean, I understand why people want to take it on themselves. You know, shipping costs money.
Yeah.
Paying somebody else to do it costs money. But say if it's a pipe with sentimental value, it's a family heirloom. It was your dad's, it was your grandfather's, it was your uncle's, it was something like that, or it's got historical significance in and of itself. You know, it's a it's a patent era Dunhill, or
Yeah.
something of that line, or you've got something that's hallmarked into the 1800s. Okay, good. Let's take care of that one properly.
Yeah.
That's
It's a good
not one to
point.
be testing your chops on.
Yeah.
Let's take care of those and make sure that it's done properly and sensitively. You
Yeah.
know,
No,
um,
that's
there are still. I have I have a little box of bone screw tenons in the shop to replace those broken bone screw tenons in the old pipes. Um, they can be converted to a push tenon. You drill the threads out of the shank and mess around a little bit, and it can be converted. But should you?
yeah.
I don't know. There's that debate, and I have this conversation with clients regularly. Do you want it restored? Do you want it conserved? Or do
Mhm.
you just want to make it pretty so you put it on a shelf? You want it
Interesting.
on, a display piece?
Yeah.
Great. We can, it's a lot less work to make it pretty for display as opposed to making it functional again.
Yeah. Good points. I never even
And
thought about
and
that.
at a certain point, a pipe deserves to show a few nicks and dings and scratches because it's been around the block a few times.
Yeah. Yeah.
Anything that made it through the wars intact deserves to have a few beauty marks, some
Oh, for
character
sure.
to it.
Yeah. Exactly. Yeah. Warts and all.
Yeah, exactly. And sanding them out and refinishing it, makes it look pretty. It could be made to look almost new again, but historically speaking, you may be doing it a disservice.
Yeah. No,
So
that's a good point.
yeah.
So before we move on to the book, so you basically there's essentially nothing you won't work on. I mean, you do all the salves, Pete's, all the
Yeah,
different
no,
brands.
I've worked on just about every brand of pipe out there.
Yeah.
The trickier ones are tend to be, the European, say Bavarian style pipes, the hunter pipes, those ones
Oh
with the
yeah. Okay.
long cherry wood
Yeah.
shank on them. Mainly because I don't have a cherry tree.
Yeah.
you know, it's hard to source materials in North America for that sort of thing, and a lot of them were not factory made. They were, the ones that I've worked on seem to be
Oh,
fairly individual.
yeah.
They were
Like
worked on as a pipe,
like a
and
local artist or something or
yeah, they
oh,
they were done start to finish by somebody that put, and to a point, you can, if you have a large stockpile of old bits and pieces sitting around, you can kind of assemble a pipe from the parts. But I can't reproduce a porcelain bowl
yeah.
for that style of pipe.
You
it
have to
just
you have
it's
to call you have to call Julius Vez for that. I'm sure he's got some of it.
well, yeah, and if you took it to a repair shop in Germany or Austria, they would probably
Yeah.
have more access to that sort of thing than I do here in Canada.
Yeah.
You
That
know,
makes sense.
but that said, I've reproduced. I've been able to reproduce some of those old style mouthpieces
Oh,
for
cool.
for a few restoration projects. Um, I posted a few months ago an 1850 hallmarked meerschaum that came with a very long cherry shank on it. I think bowl to button, this thing was almost 3 feet long.
Wow.
I had to disassemble it to photograph. It was too big for my photo booth. So and it, the original mouthpiece had snapped off. It was one of those just almost just a straight tube with a few little buttons turned in along the length, and a threaded fitting at the end. So thankfully, about 4 inches or something long. So all right, piece of rod in the lathe, and let's see if we can do this.
Yeah, it's cool. It's another thing because another cool thing about your website. Like I said, when you're kind of chronicling history, right, of all these antiques and all these pipes kind of coming
Yeah,
from your
I
shop,
try as
which
much
is
as
really neat.
possible. Yeah,
Yeah,
as much as possible. I like to know what I'm working on myself. I like
yeah,
to know where it comes from, and whether it's significant. Um, there's even you find the right model of even like a K Woody. They were mass produced in the thousands in the
yeah,
states, and but there's sort of the drugstore K Woodies, and then there's the higher end, paid a lot more attention to
yeah.
K
Well,
Woodies that
yeah,
they're collectible,
yeah.
and
Well, kind of like Brigham's in a sense.
it's kind of important to know the difference between the two when they show up at the shop.
Yeah. No, that's for sure. I can imagine.
Yeah,
Um, have the we'll get into the book right away. Just
sure.
to wrap up, just I'm curious. Have we're not going to get political here. Don't worry. But I'm just curious about like tariffs and supplies. I don't
Yeah,
know where has that impacted you at all. I don't know where you get your
absolutely.
supplies from, or
Yeah,
it has, eh?
yeah. Uh, there are no parts suppliers in Canada for, I mean, pipe specific things.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah.
So I can find things like Delrin rod for tenons in Canada. I can find acrylic rods or square blanks in Canada for stems, but anything else is imported basically.
Okay.
Um, and most of what I order from Vermont Freehand
Okay.
in the States, and definitely it's gotten more expensive. Uh,
Yeah.
I mean, nothing gets cheaper over time.
No. Exactly. Yep.
but there is currently a standing 25% tariff on pipes and pipe parts coming into Canada.
I
That's
wondered.
part of the retaliatory
Yeah. Yeah.
shenanigans,
I
one way or the
wondered.
other.
Yeah, I got some tobacco in about a month ago from Smoking Pipes. The what is it? I got it up there. The San Sepulchral, and
Yeah,
I got it slapped with the standard duty, but I was wondering when other duties were going to kick in, and it was it
yeah,
August 1st?
yeah. August 1st was bandied about. I think it was
Yeah,
going up. Maybe don't quote me on this. I think maybe 35% instead of 25. But
yeah,
yeah, I've been resisting putting orders in. Thankfully, my stocks have been in pretty good shape so far. Uh, but it's one special project away from having to put an order in.
yeah,
And so, yeah, that will impact pricing, because there's a flat rate shipping. So whatever fits in the box is what's coming at that price. And so you try to put as much as possible into the box
yeah,
when you order to get that flat rate to make it worthwhile. I mean, paying $30 US to ship one stem or a shank, a gold shank band, or anything like that. It just doesn't make any sense financially. So load them up, but a part that sells on the website for $6 or $7 US ends up costing over twice that by the time it's in my hand.
yeah, but yeah,
When you add in the exchange rate, and the tariffs, and then the standard import and taxes on
Yeah.
whatever comes across
Yeah.
the border
The,
anyway.
the, the exchange rate is always been the worst, but it's we've I don't know if we ever got used to that as Canadians. We always complain about it, but I mean,
Yeah, yeah,
it's that
yeah.
it
But
certainly doesn't
you
help with
know,
everything else.
yeah, it's I think it's part of being Canadian, griping
Yeah,
about the value of the dollar. Are
totally.
we above 70 cents?
Yeah,
You know,
exactly.
but you know, that's just part of life.
Yeah,
That's
no,
fine. I'm willing to pay the exchange rate.
yeah,
The
yeah.
the the add-ons are a little frustrating at times,
Oh, for sure.
but that's there's nothing that I can do to impact that. The best I can do is warn people if
Yeah,
they're
you know what?
sending things,
Yeah,
or I provide clients with the clearest instructions that I can. Uh, if you're shipping from a certain country, declare it this way. Here's a tariff code to put in on your declaration. You know, do yourself a favor and insure it for the minimum amount you're comfortable with.
yeah,
Because if it gets misclassified as a purchase on my end, if it's interpreted as that I am buying a pipe from an international sender rather than
yeah.
a temporary import for repair, then all
That's
of
a good
those
point.
fees get added on.
You're right.
And the option is either those fees get added to the bill and the client has to reimburse them,
Yeah,
or the package gets sent back.
that's a really
Depending
good
on
point.
the amount of fees, like
Yeah,
it doesn't make sense sometimes. So
yeah,
you
that's
have
a
to be
really
very careful. I don't trust a postal clerk to fill out a custom form for
no,
anyone. They will
no.
always take the shorthand version,
Yeah,
you know. So instead of estate pipe for repair, it would just be estate pipe, or even just pipe,
yeah.
and that opens the whole interpretation up. So
No, that's a very good point for
yeah,
anyone that's shipping internationally to Dad's Pipes is make
yeah.
sure that you
Do the
declare that
paperwork properly, please. It's a
exactly.
lot
It's
easier.
yeah. No, I can see
Yeah,
that. Okay, let's get into the book here.
you bet.
Um, Brigham Pipes, Charles Lemon, A Century of Canadian Briar. It's available for $24 on smokingpipes.com. It is also available through Charles at dadspipes.com for $32.50 plus shipping and handling. And if you go through Charles, you get a signed copy, which is kind of
Yeah.
neat. I bought two, one for posterity and one to kind of muck around with. So
Annotated margins. That's always a good sign.
yeah, exactly. Um, so Dad's Pipes, 10 years old. You were been in the restoration business for quite a while now. I guess it kind of seems like maybe a bit of a natural progression to go into this book, I know why you've having read the book and been on your website for quite a while now. I know how the two bled into one another, but maybe just tell
Yeah,
our viewers sort of
for sure.
what started the
Yeah,
idea to write the book.
yeah. Well, the book honestly was an evolution of a few projects, a few personal projects. I didn't set out to write a book, which
Yeah,
sounds a little strange. I had no intention of writing a book. In fact, um, what I had started doing was cleaning up my father's collection, and the vast majority of which were Brigham Pipes. My parents were both born and raised in Toronto, which is where Brigham was founded. And, in the 60s and 70s, when my dad was buying pipes, uh, they were the pipe producer really in the country. They were the largest going concern in Canada. They were pumping out, thousands of pipes a month. So it was only natural that he went to the local producer to buy from a local shop,
that's cool.
hit before his time, buy local.
Yeah,
Um, so I started, cleaning his up and trying to figure out what I was looking at. What are these pipes? How old are they? Some of the stamps are different. What does that mean? Uh, that sort of thing. Just, the natural sort of curiosity of trying to figure out what I had in my hands. And then as I got into restorations, I started surfing antique fairs and eBay sales and that sort of thing, looking for estate pipes to practice on.
Okay.
And at first, I bought whatever the heck I could find. But as you might suspect, a lot of the estate sales and antique fairs in southwestern Ontario, where I am, had a lot of Brigham pipes in them. I mean, they're made an hour away in Toronto, or they were made an hour away in Toronto. And I think at a certain point, I'm not sure, if you could call yourself a Canadian pipe smoker, if you didn't have at least one Brigham pipe in the rack, back in the day.
Yeah.
So I started then, keeping an eye out for them, and ended up with quite a few of them at one point, but I realized I've got 5 bent bulldogs. Well, I don't need 5 bent bulldogs. So I'm going to keep the 5-dot or the 6-dot, and I'll move the other ones to other stewards. They can move on and make somebody else's pipe rack complete.
Yeah.
And that kind of morphed into my own, just curating my own collection. And then I started writing it down because I went, wait, which shape numbers are these and what do I have? And that's when I figured out that Brigham never kept a record of the shapes that they made, which seems very counterintuitive when you look at other pipe makers. Peterson, for example, has got in relatively a warehouse of archives going back to the 1840s, or and they can tell you who worked for them and when a model was introduced to the lineup, and all that lovely detail that Mark Irwin has wedged into his book on Peterson pipes, and none of that information existed for Brigham, not in any organized fashion anyway. They didn't keep track of shape numbers. They kept track of sales by quality level. So they could tell you in any given year how many 1-dot, 2-dot, 3-dot, 4-dot pipes they'd sold, but they couldn't tell you how many of those were billiards and how many of those were bulldogs and how many, were freehand or whatever. And so I started to keep track, and my list became the nucleus of the Brigham Shape Chart project, which I posted on the website. That became a blog post.
Yeah.
And basically, I just created a spreadsheet that went, from 1 to 100. I figured that would be a good starting point, and I've got a 12 and a 13 and a 4 and a 56 and a whatever. And I'd start filling in the blanks and putting in brief descriptions and whatever. And that became version 1.0 of the shape chart. And over time, my collection grew. And then blog readers started sending me photos of their pipes that weren't in the shape chart. And so we'd add a new number. And then I'd get a photo and we'd start to fill in the blanks. The latest version of the shape chart is in the back of the book. And anyone who's looked at the book can see there are still blanks. But for most of them, we've got some photos, which is great because the shapes tended to morph a little bit over time, and there were certain shape numbers that were reused. There's a shape number for a tulip-shaped bent pipe. The original pipe is a relatively small bowl, and then a decade or two later they reused the shape code, but it represented quite a larger pipe. Still a tulip by definition, but not the same shape. Certainly not the same size. So there are a number of entries that say, 32A, 32B, as I had I got conflicting photos and things like that. So the shape chart developed that way, and then I wrote up a blog post. Oh, it's probably 7 or 8 years ago at this point, trying to explain the dots, dates, and markings. You know, I found this pipe. It's got one gold. It's got a brass dot on the side. How is that different from one with 3 dots on the side? And this one is stamped Brigham in a funny script, and this one is block letters, or you know, whatever. And so those details started, you know, sort of breaking them down. It's okay, according to the brochures that I have or found online, you know, here's a rough age category of stuff. And those two projects kind of morphed together to kickstart the book.
So through basically your own, you know, your own history and chronicling your own backyard,
Yeah.
really kind of led to this grassroots movement where people, like you said, started to email you, and
Yep.
collectively you started to just put everything together, and it got bigger and bigger. I think the shape chart is what, I don't know if it was the shape chart or the article, but one of those is what led me to your website several years ago.
Yeah.
And I think it was the article that Dan Moore, because he reached out to you, right?
Mhm.
Maybe just explain that, because I don't want to mistell the story, but I guess he saw what you were doing and reached out and liked
Yeah,
what was going on.
that when I first published that dots, dates, and markings post with, you know, trying to break down the history of certain things, it got picked up by Pipedia. They asked me if they could republish it
Yeah,
as
that's
part
where
of
I
the
saw it.
wiki, and I
That's where I
said,
saw it.
yeah, absolutely, go ahead.
Yeah.
And I mean, I now have there's a disclaimer at the top of it that said this was written a while ago, and not everything is as accurate as it could be.
Yeah.
If you want the latest info, please buy the book.
Yeah. No, well, it's
You know, shameless plug, but yeah, that's fine. But yeah, that post and a couple of emails to the general email address at Brigham Enterprises now, at brighampipes.com, you know, saying, I received this and I've never seen one like it before. Can you tell me anything about it? And I can tell you, Brigham still receives multiple emails like this every year. People contact them and they say, what do I have? You know, and so they play the Antiques Roadshow game and they say, well, according to our you know, hive knowledge,
yeah.
it dates from this period. It would have come out sort of, you know, in this catalog or whatever. And so yeah, Dan Moore, who is currently the president of Brigham Enterprises, he and I started corresponding fairly regularly, not often, but regularly, playing the Antiques Roadshow game, and fill in a few more blanks. And then when I decided that there was enough information starting to come in to actually, you know, publish something bigger than a blog post, I contacted Dan and you know, I went into the office in Etobicoke and we sat down and started talking about the idea of a book, and they were very helpful in that they provided me with essentially everything that they had in their archives.
That's cool.
Open access. I mean, I took the boxes home with me, which is
Wow.
fairly trusting of them.
Yeah.
That said, 3 boxes.
Yeah.
That's it. That's it. 3 boxes of random documentation, essentially. One of which was almost entirely competitors' brochures and catalogs. So they kept a very good eye on what was happening in the market and the sort of pipes that other people were producing, and, you know, kind of how would we make those ourselves with the Brigham system and that sort of thing. But my take on the family at least the few family members that were involved with running the business, was that they were not sentimental. They didn't look backwards. They looked forwards.
Yeah.
And so I think from a certain point of view, they'd reuse bits of old brochures to create the next one. But when they decided that a shape wasn't selling and they weren't going to make that one anymore, that was it.
Yeah, I know. I've talked to Patrick Blatter a few times in Montreal, and they don't have anything either. I mean, they've been around for 100+ years because I've asked them, and I imagine he's probably got a dusty old box somewhere in the house
somewhere. I hope
that
I
he
really
probably
hope
doesn't
so.
even know what's in it.
Yeah. Well, and that was kind of where Brigham was as well when I started. They had moved to the facility in Etobicoke, late 90s, mid to late 90s, I think. I have to check my own book to find the exact date. The dates wander around in my head. But when they did that, they cleaned out what was the old factory, because the building they were in was 80% factory and 10% offices and 5% store. So their retail establishment was tacked onto the front of the factory building.
I never knew
and that. So there were lots of dusty little corners with things in them. That, according to Dan, a lot of it ended up in a dumpster when they moved. Because what are we going to do with this? Yeah. But of course, at the time that they moved, they were already transitioning from production to distribution. As well. Like in the early 90s, they started farming out some of the work. They'd get bowls that were phrased, rough carved, roughly shaped bowls. They'd start buying in from a factory in Italy. And not that that's new either. I found invoices from the 50s and 60s where Brigham was buying roughly shaped bowls from U.S. companies in New York and down the eastern seaboard, just to meet demand in Canada. So, buying bits and pieces wasn't new, but they were finishing the pipes in Toronto. They had a staff of 40, 50, 60 craftsmen working at different stations all through the factory. Unfortunately, by the time that I started working on the book, there wasn't a lot of archival material, and unfortunately, Roy Brigham died in the 70s, and Herb passed away in the early 2000s, his son. Roy's grandson, Mike, ran the company in the 70s and 80s. And then Dan Moore took over in the early 90s. He had been there for a while, and Mike was off, decided to focus on other business ventures. So a lot of the family connection was a little bit stale.
Okay.
By the time I started writing the book, I did get to sit down and have some great conversations with Mike Brigham on the phone, talking about basically rescuing the company through the 70s and 80s, nursing it along, trying to figure out how to keep things going. Because the bottom just dropped out of the pipe market in about 1975.
Really? Even that early?
Yeah, globally.
Huh. Wow.
Globally, there was this, the rush of the Danish freehand movement in the 60s and early 70s, and then for whatever reason, globally, pipe smoking started to become less cool, less fashionable, less popular, and sales just tanked
I
globally.
guess, yeah. I often think of the 80s and 90s as it tanking, but I guess when you compare the amount of pipes sold in the 50s and 60s
Oh,
versus the 70s, it was probably
huge
significantly,
difference.
yeah,
Yeah. Yeah. 50s and 60s companies were just churning them out as quickly as they could. You know, not saying they weren't dealing with quality, because it's absolutely possible to get a top quality factory made pipe. Uh, so not casting dispersions, but they were making a lot of pipes,
yeah.
and people were buying a lot of pipes.
Yeah,
Uh,
I think you say in the book at Brigham's height, there's 650 retailers, 100,000 pipes a
yeah,
year,
yeah,
50 to
yeah.
50 to
They had
60
you know,
people, I think, were
yeah, complete
in the factory.
national network of distributors and smoke shops. They ran
Yeah.
three individual retail stores in Toronto alone.
Wow.
Uh, yeah, and distributors across, coast to coast to coast. It was a going concern, and they were ramping up production year over year over year since the end of the war.
Yeah.
Since the mid 40s, it was going year over year, and then in the mid 70s, it just kind of went poof. And that was not just a Brigham thing. That was global. The entire market just kind of rebooted somehow, as
Yeah.
things often do.
So, when you were talking to Mike and Dan, did you come across, when you took some of the archives home, did you come across anything that they were surprised that you'd uncovered, or that they didn't know about? Anything,
Um,
or just in general interest that
yeah, there were certainly things. Actually, one of the first things that Mike said to me when he called me after I sent him a copy of the finished book, and he called me, and one of the first things he said was, "How did you find this stuff? Like, there's stuff in here that the family didn't know."
Yeah, I noticed some stuff from like uh, birth certificates, and
Yeah, yeah.
just
The
really,
the the, the very early day, like chapter one, was a rodeo of research. It really was, because Roy Brigham's family moved from moved from Ontario down to Kansas
yeah,
in
it was,
the 1880s. I'm trying to remember it now, but again, dates and numbers fly out of my head. But anyway, they were the patriarch of the family decided that they would go, and at that point it was uh, Roy's father and mother and an older sister. Roy was actually born in Kansas.
yeah, I found that fascinating that
Yeah,
the
yeah.
what we
Founder of
typically
a great Canadian pipe dynasty,
was
born
born in
in the
Kansas.
U.S.
Yeah,
You know,
yeah.
but as far as I know, he uh, always identified as a Canadian, because very shortly after his birth, something happened, and we don't know what. I could not find anything uh, definitive, but they go down. Roy is born, and then the mother reappears in Toronto with these two young children without her husband, and and nobody knows what happens. But it was only a few years after they had made the trek down. So
And you say too, like, I mean, it's a fascinating read. Like, he's born in the U.S. They move back to Canada. He moves back without his father. His youngest sister dies,
yeah,
right? A few years later, he's got a sister that dies, and his mother
yeah,
dies. I mean, he's on his own. Correct me if I'm wrong. Is it 14 or 15 years old? He's by himself.
yeah, yeah. As
Just
far
wild.
as far as we can determine, he was raised by his maternal grandmother in
And
Toronto. So after his mother died, he would have been 6 or 7 years old when his mother
crazy.
passed.
Yeah. But
Um,
grandma dies a few years later, though, too. I mean,
yes,
isn't it by the time
yeah,
he's 19, he's actually totally on his own?
yeah,
Hey, working at this um, tobacco shop,
Yes, working for a cigar manufacturer in
cigar
Toronto.
manufacturer. This is
Yeah,
fascinating. It's
yeah.
so. Where did you find all that? Was it
It's a combination of ancestry and census data. I spent a lot of time digging through city directories. So back in the day, there was a company that published directories of major urban centers in Canada, and the great thing was that there was a list of businesses and addresses and contact information for those places, but also what I mean was sort of the precursor of the phone book. Here's your business listings, and then here's your personal listings, and they made notes about where someone was employed if they knew it.
okay?
So you could search. A lot of these things have been digitized. They're at Library and Archives Canada. They're at the City of Toronto Library. I dug
Okay.
some up in the City of Windsor Library, and downloaded the PDFs. And thank God for technology, because it means I didn't have to dig through all that tiny font looking
Yeah.
for keywords. But you'd find, oh, so and so is listed as a pipe maker at Brigham and Company at a
Oh,
certain date,
yeah.
or a clerk or whatever. So you can kind of build the nucleus of the history of these very small shops,
Yeah.
um, just based off of these tidbits of information.
Yeah.
Really,
So
it was a
with it,
lot of piecing together.
I bet it sounds tedious. So with some family background from Mike and Daniel, you sort of follow the trail of breadcrumbs, I guess, and you
Essentially,
and dates start popping up, and you kind of put this all
yeah.
together. It's
Yeah,
it's a really interesting read
yeah.
for
You start
especially
wrapping the
listeners. Eh?
string around the pins.
Yeah, yeah, yeah,
You build your conspiracy map on the wall.
yeah. Um, okay. Yeah, I think we said the height for Brigham Pipes sounds like it was 50s and 60s, eh? Post World
Yeah,
War II. Is that?
definitely.
Yeah, and they had the fire was in the 70s, I guess, eh? That was there a fire in the
It
70s?
was, yeah, yeah, and that was when Mike Brigham and his sister Heather were teenagers. Mike, I think, was still in high school, um, and his parents had gone on vacation. They were overseas somewhere on a holiday, and at that point in time, the employees were allowed to smoke on the line. They could smoke at their
Oh, okay.
stations. But of course, being, well, essentially a woodworking shop, they had this huge dust collection ventilation system, to catch all of the debris coming off of the lathes and the sanders and all that stuff, all the shaping equipment. And somebody had put a cigarette a little too close to the vacuum takeoff, and it got sucked in, and it set the sawdust
Wow,
smoldering in the system,
that's crazy.
and fire broke out in the middle of the night. And so the fire department showed up, and uh, the call was placed to the house where Mike, as the oldest representative available at the time,
Jeez.
he and his sister went over to the factory and spent the night watching for a flare up. Basically, the fire department had the fire put out and contained, but
That's
sawdust
crazy.
smolders for a very
Yeah.
long time, and so they were told to stay and keep an eye on things. And there's an anecdote in the book where they killed time racing office chairs down the ramp on the
Yeah, I
back
remember
of the
reading.
factory.
That's right. Yeah, I
Uh,
remember
but
reading
the
that.
fire
Just
basically wiped out 80% of inventory, like,
wow.
and work in process. It just clear cut
And
the factory.
I think you say in the book too, he didn't have insurance
He
or
there
something, or
what
a minimum
there
or
was
something.
insurance, but they were underinsured.
Underinsured. That was it. Okay.
Yeah, Herb, it seems, wasn't a big believer in insurance, for whatever reason, and so the insurance covered only a portion of the damage.
Okay.
And so that led to one of the first sort of reassessments of staffing levels and the range of products that were available. You see, in the early 70s, the catalogs were still fairly extensive, but when you get to 1975, the product line has been cut back from a 7-dot range to 5 dots and a more limited number of shapes. They basically had to dig themselves out of the hole.
So yeah, it sounds like you were saying earlier, mid 70s, the pipe industry starts to plummet, and then they've got to fire and lose half their inventory on top of that.
Yeah,
Which
yeah,
I'm
it
sure it didn't
wasn't a
help.
good coincidence for them.
Yeah,
No.
yeah, that's okay. We'll start to wrap up here because I don't want to take too much more of your time, and I have a feeling we could probably talk about this book until dinner time. Is it the first book ever written on Brigham?
I believe so.
That would be my guess. Yeah.
I believe so. There have been a number of articles written. I think you can find a brief history of Brigham on the Smoking Pipes blog. You can find my previous article on Pipedia and on my blog at Dad's Pipes. There are a few newspaper articles from the Toronto Star or whatever, things like that. But I think this is the first sort of comprehensive history of the company.
Yeah. No, it's
And as far as I know, the only version of a shape chart ever produced and published, because again,
wow.
Brigham didn't keep track
Yeah.
of those details. So it's a sort of a crowdsourced shape chart.
Couple more questions here. Is Brigham the oldest factory pipe maker in North America? 1906. I tried to Google some of
No,
this
I wouldn't say North America. There are very likely older factories in the U.S.
that are still around.
in one form or another.
Oh, okay. Because
There was a lot of amalgamating and buyouts and things that happened through the 40s, 50s, 60s in the States. But it's certainly one of the oldest continuously more or less continuously operating businesses. It's, as you pointed out, Bladder and Bladder is slightly older. I think they started in 1901, if memory serves. Brigham claims 1906 as their start date. But the Bladder never went into factory production. Those are all still individually handmade.
Yeah.
So much smaller production runs, and kind of a different clientele.
Yeah.
Okay,
I guess last question here. So the book Brigham Pipes, A Century of Canadian Briar, 1906 to 2006.
Yeah.
And that popped out to me because you're the last Canadian pipe made, as I believe you say in the book, rolled off the pipeline in June 2006. The final
somewhere
pipe.
There, yeah.
So was there a reason you stopped the book at 2006 as opposed to taking it up to 2023, or I guess 2022 before the book was published?
Yeah, part of the challenge about writing a history of anything is that it keeps going. I mean, unless you're talking about Hudson's Bay Company at this point, after their 350 odd year run. But yeah, so it's necessary on a practical level to draw a line in the sand somewhere.
Yeah.
But yeah, after 2006, I mean, the next series of production pipes that were released by Brigham was the 2007 series, And that's what we now see in the shops, the Algonquins and the
The French and the Italian
Chinooks, and
pipes.
that
Yeah.
series of pipes.
Yeah.
That was officially launched in 2007, and they are 100% European made.
Yeah. Yeah.
Between 2001 and 2006, they were increasingly the work sort of morphed. They were transitioned. In the late 90s, early 2000s, they were buying in semi-shaped or fully shaped bowls, and then they'd add a stem, a rough stem fitted, and then it would be a polished stem, and then it would be a finished pipe. And the last thing that they were doing in the fact that on the floor in Toronto was adding the pins. They were grading the pipes and adding the pins still in Toronto. The pins were were mostly dropped. The first three quality levels of the 2007 series are pinned, 1, 2, and 3 dots. After you get beyond that, they're not pinned anymore, mainly because it's a lot of work. I mean, making a 7-pin star pattern freehand, it has its downfalls.
Yeah.
Did
are any of the old? Well, I mean, are any of the old guys that used to make the pipes still around from 2006?
By and large, no.
Yeah.
If they are, they're.
I guess.
They're
Yeah.
in their 80s.
Yeah.
70s or 80s at this point. There are a few, notable ex-Brigham folks that went on to do things. Phil Trippus is one name that jumps to mind.
That's right.
I've
heard that name.
Yeah, he came over from Greece and found work at Brigham, learned the pipe making craft, and when he left Brigham, he set himself up and started making pipes under his own name, and did that basically from his basement for years.
That look unusually close to Brigham's.
They do well. They say you can if you know who's who, you can identify who did the work based on the style of rustication.
Interesting.
On a given Brigham pipe.
Yeah.
And by and large, I think the majority of Brigham pipes were rusticated. There are smooth examples. And at a certain point, you could order any quality level, smooth, rusticated, or half and half, depending on what you wanted. We tend to see rustication now as a good way to cover up imperfections in the briar.
Yeah.
Hide the flaws. But it was a design feature originally. So, thought to create a cooler smoking pipe.
Yeah. I got a few Brighams in there. Most of them are like older ones. They're half and half smooth, half rusticated.
Yeah, they got some smooth designs on the sides or whatever. Yeah, they went through a few different sort of stages of what was basically what was popular at the time. But there are distinctions between the rustication styles. If you knew who was at Brigham at the time, you could say, "Oh, that was that." And if you put a Trippus rustication beside a Brigham, you could tell which one was his.
Yeah, that's interesting. Huh.
So,
they're pretty much I guess a cigar company now, more or less. I know they distribute, but pipes must be a very small portion of what they do.
They are now, yes. Well, if you look at the global tobacco market nowadays, pipe smokers take up between 0.5% and 1% of the total tobacco market. It is, hugely lopsided towards cigarettes, which I don't think is going to surprise anyone.
No.
Cigarettes, cigars, and then pipes down at the end. So it was the cigar boom in the 90s that really saved Brigham at the time. They were looking for any other source of income, really. The pipe market had slumped. And so they started distributing first pipe tobacco in the I'm going to say late 70s, early 80s.
Okay.
They started packaging some stuff on their own under their own brand at about the same time. They're currently, I think Brigham Enterprises currently is the distributor for things like Backwoods cigars and K-Woody, various other things, lighters and tampers and
all the accessories,
all the accessory bits.
Yeah.
But yes, when I was researching the book, I think Dan said the pipe sales specifically made up about 5% of their income at that time. That was a few years ago, so I don't know where it's gone from that point. I'd like to think that it's increased. I'd like to think that there are still repairs that I'll be doing next year. But yeah, the market globally is just a teeny weeny little percentage of the larger tobacco market, and globally that's shrinking. People become aware of the health concerns from tobacco, and that's reflected in the consolidation of production and that sort of thing.
Yeah, and I mean, eventually what kind of worries me in the grander scheme of things is eventually the cigar boom has got to slow down. Like a lot of
inevitably,
things,
yes, I would say at a certain point. Yeah.
And if that starts to slow down, I don't know, Brigham might have to pivot again if it's
Well,
which though,
I mean, it's the nature of any long-standing business.
Yeah, that's true. Well,
I mean,
they've as you point out in the book, they've had to pivot quite a number of times and under hard times over 100+ years. So
I mean, any company that's still around after 2 world wars, a global depression, several recessions, changing social attitudes, you name it, they've lived
pandemics. They can now add
exactly.
They can add pandemics now to their repertoire of having survived.
Yeah, I mean, you think everything that's happened since 1906.
Yeah, that's wild.
Really, I mean, that Queen Victoria was on the throne when Roy Brigham opened his first shop.
Yeah, it's you point that out quite elegantly in the book.
It was horse and buggies, and railways, and the newspaper came out several times a day because it was the only way to get news.
Yeah, I wonder if when Roy started that company back in 1906, if he thought you and I would be sitting here talking about his legacy.
Well, that's a very good question, and I mean, from very humble beginnings, this company sprang. I mean, he was originally trained as a pipe repairer.
That's right.
Well, he was, because there was nobody in Toronto doing this. There were, any pipes. The majority of pipes on the market in Toronto at the turn of the last century were imported from Montreal or Quebec or from overseas.
Okay.
And they just transitioned from clay to briar, really, in the mass production spectrum. And there was nobody in Toronto that could fix these things when they broke. And so this fellow in Toronto brought in an Austrian gent to handle repairs, and a very young Roy Brigham was apprenticed to this guy, and he learned to fix, learned to make from scratch, and started doing it basically as a sideline until it caught on enough to open his own shop.
Yeah, right time, right place, as the saying goes.
Right time, right place. Yep, and a willing mentor.
And I guess.
Yeah, the fellow that he worked for, whose name I would have to look up in chapter 1. Basically, fronted him the cash to open his own first little storefront, which was a single room. of a building, basically. And it, it had gear on one side and a counter on the other.
Yeah, Wilson Humber. Is that his name?
Yes,
Wilson's
Wilson.
Wilson Humber. Yeah,
Yep.
yeah. Anyways, I'll let you go. I don't want to take too much of your time. Maybe we'll do this again later on in the year just to see what you're up to. We can revisit and see what Dad's Pipes is up to in the future. But the book is Charles Lemon, Brigham Pipes, A Century of Canadian Briar. It's a fantastic book. It's 100 pages. If you, any new pipe book that comes out, I buy on principle. I like to read. I like to collect books on pipes. So I highly recommend going out and purchasing this. You can go through dadspipes.com through Charles, and he'll sign you a copy, 32.50 Canadian plus shipping and handling. And you can also purchase it from smokingpipes.com in the US for $24. It's a fantastic book. Thanks for doing this, Charles. You really, first book on Brigham Pipes. I think it's probably safe to say it's maybe the first Canadian book ever written on pipes as well. So get yourself a copy of this. It's the research and the information you're going to find in here on Brigham Pipes it's fascinating. I was like I said, we just touched on a little bit of it, and we could probably talk a few more hours on it. But I'm on vacation, so I could chat all day. But you probably need to work, and I don't want to monopolize any more of your time.
Oh,
I will tell our viewers also that there's a really good interview on Pipes Magazine by Brian Levine. So Charles was interviewed by Brian. It's episode 597. So go check that out. Get the book. If you have any pipes that need repairing, I highly recommend dadspipes.com. So Charles, thanks again for your time.
thanks very much. Glad to be here.